I was standing in the alley behind a Tim Hortons on Barton Street in Hamilton, Ontario at 5:47 in the morning on a Wednesday in February 2025, my bare hands buried inside a black garbage bag that smelled like stale coffee grounds and yesterday's chili, when a man in a charcoal wool coat and leather gloves stepped around the corner and said my name. "Excuse me, are you Marcus Webb?" I looked up. The alley was still dark except for the orange glow of the streetlight at the far end, and this man was standing maybe 3 feet from the dumpster I was leaning into, his shoes clean, his collar pressed, breath fogging in the cold like someone who had come from somewhere warm and planned to return to it shortly. I had a paper cup in my left hand that I'd found in the bag, half full of something I hadn't decided whether to drink yet. My coat was a green parka I'd picked up from a church donation bin on James Street 6 weeks earlier. It had someone else's name written on the interior tag in black marker. Terry, it said. I wasn't Terry. "Who's asking?" I said. "My name is Hugh Gallagher. I'm an estate lawyer with Gallagher & Associates in Toronto. I've been looking for you for 11 days. I set the cup down on the rim of the dumpster. My fingers were so cold I could barely feel them. February in Hamilton is not the kind of cold that apologizes for itself. It comes off Lake Ontario flat and purposeful, and it has no interest in the fact that your coat is missing its bottom zipper pull and your boots have been re-soled with duct tape twice already. "You've been looking for me," I said. "Your great-uncle Bernard Whitmore passed away on January 14th. He named you as the sole beneficiary of his estate." I didn't say anything. A car rolled past the end of the alley, headlights cutting through the dark, and then it was quiet again except for the hum of the ventilation unit above the Tim Hortons back door. "Bernard Whitmore," I said finally, "my great-uncle Bernard." "Yes. I met that man once at a cousin's wedding in Sudbury. I was 19 years old. He remembered it well," Hugh said. "He left documentation of it, actually, in his personal papers." His estate. The estate includes a commercial property portfolio in Hamilton and Burlington, a cabin property near Parry Sound, and liquid assets and investments totaling approximately $12.8 million. I stood very still in that alley. The duct tape on my left boot had started to peel at the toe, and the cold was getting through, and a number I had no framework for, $12.8 million, was sitting in the February air between a man in a wool coat and a man in a dead stranger's parka. "There's a condition," Hugh said. "Of course there is. Perhaps we could find somewhere warmer to discuss it." He had a point. We walked 3 blocks to a Greek diner on King Street, the kind of place that has been there since 1978 and hasn't updated the menus since 1994 and makes coffee that tastes like a reasonable decision. Hugh ordered coffee. I ordered eggs and toast and a bowl of soup because I hadn't eaten a full meal in 3 days and my body had stopped waiting for my permission to make decisions. The waitress looked at me, at my coat, at my hands still raw from the cold, and then she looked at Hugh in his wool coat with his leather briefcase, and she made the calculation that people make in those situations, and she brought everything without comment, which was a small kindness I filed away somewhere. I keep small kindnesses because there haven't been many of them lately. "Eat first," Hugh said. I ate, not the way you eat in a diner when you're having breakfast before work and you have somewhere to be. I ate the way you eat when you're not sure when you'll eat again, fast and thorough, and without conversation, working through the soup and the eggs and both pieces of toast and drinking the orange juice in 2 swallows. Hugh watched me without making me feel watched, which is a skill not many people have. When I pushed the plate back, he opened the briefcase. "Your great-uncle Bernard Whitmore died at age 76 at his home in Hamilton on January 14th. He spent the last 4 decades of his life as a property developer and investor in the Hamilton and Burlington area. He was not a prominent figure. He didn't put his name on buildings or give interviews. He bought properties that other people had given up on, renovated them, and either leased them at below-market rates to nonprofits and social services or converted them into affordable housing. It was a quiet practice. Very few people knew the full scope of it." "I didn't know him," I said. "Not really. My father's side of the family, Bernard was the uncle nobody talked about much. He left for Toronto young, made money, didn't come back often. I remember at the wedding he shook my hand and asked me what I did, and I told him I was studying to be a trade supervisor, and he said, 'A man who learns to build things will never run out of work.' And then someone took him off to talk to someone else, and that was it." Hugh pulled a document from the briefcase. A handwritten page, photocopied in the careful script of someone who knew they were writing for the record. "He noted that conversation in his personal journal," Hugh said. "Several times, in fact, over the years. He also had you followed." He had me followed. Through a private investigation service. Not intrusively. Periodic updates on your career, your family situation. He saw what happened in the last 2 years. I looked at the table. The soup bowl was empty. I could feel the warmth of it settling into my stomach, which had been empty long enough that food felt strange in it. "He saw me lose everything," I said. "Yes, and he believed that what you lost and how you lost it made you the right person for what he had in mind." Hugh set the will on the table, 19 pages, tabbed with paper clips, the assembled final instructions of a man I barely knew. The estate is valued at approximately $12.8 million. This includes a portfolio of 8 commercial properties in Hamilton and Burlington, a 4-bedroom cabin property near Parry Sound on Georgian Bay, and investment accounts and liquid assets. You are the sole beneficiary. And the condition. Hugh took a breath. Bernard also owned, through a numbered corporation, a transitional housing facility in Hamilton's North End called Bridgeway House. He purchased the property in 2007, converted it from a former industrial building, and has operated it entirely from personal funds for 17 years, 38 beds, 3 meals a day, employment support, addiction counseling, mental health referrals. The facility serves approximately 180 individuals annually. The staff and current residents knew Bernard only as Whitmore, a weekly volunteer who showed up every Tuesday to fix things and serve dinner. No one knew the building was his. I stared at him. He ran the shelter, anonymously, for 17 years. He served Tuesday dinners and replaced the boiler twice, and once spent an entire weekend repainting the common room because he felt the color was too institutional. The staff assumed he was a retired tradesman who needed somewhere to put his time. Why? Hugh set a second document on the table, a letter Bernard's handwriting on plain paper dated November 2024. "He asked me to read you the relevant section," Hugh said. He cleared his throat. "In 1984, I was living in a rooming house in Toronto's East End, and I had $17 to my name and a drinking problem I had not yet admitted was a drinking problem. I lost 3 jobs in 2 years. I slept on a friend's couch until the friend asked me to leave, which was fair. I slept in my car in the parking lot of an Esso station on Kingston Road for 6 weeks in October and November. I was 35 years old, and I had nothing, and I believed I deserved nothing because I had told myself that story so many times it had started to feel true. A man named Walter Arsenault changed that. He was a volunteer at a drop-in center on Parliament Street. He was retired, 62 years old, a former electrician. He saw me sitting alone at a table in the corner one Tuesday night, and he came and sat across from me and asked me what I had worked on that I was proud of, not what had gone wrong. What I had done that I was proud of. Nobody had asked me a question like that in years. That question saved my life. Not the programs, not the housing, not the money I eventually made. The question, the fact that someone sat down and asked it." Hugh folded the letter. "The condition," he continued, "is that you personally manage Bridgeway House for a minimum of 5 years. You must live within 20 minutes of the facility, be present and active in operations no fewer than 40 hours per week, and you may not delegate management to a hired director during the 5-year period. If you decline or fail to fulfill the condition, the entire estate transfers to the Whitmore Family Foundation, a nonprofit board of trustees, and you receive nothing." I sat in that booth for a long time. Hugh refilled my coffee from the carafe on the table without asking. Outside King Street was starting to fill up with morning traffic. I watched a city bus go past, full of people on their way somewhere. A man who had been sleeping in his pickup truck since November and eating from garbage bags for the past 3 weeks was being offered $12 million on the condition that he spend the next 5 years running a shelter for people who were living exactly the life he was living right now. Bernard Whitmore hadn't chosen me in spite of where I'd ended up. He'd chosen me because of it. But before I tell you what I decided, I need to tell you how I got from being a construction site supervisor in Hamilton to standing in an alley at 6 in the morning looking for something to eat. Because you need to understand what the fall feels like before you can understand what it means when someone stops it. My name is Marcus Webb. I was born in 1982 in Hamilton, the kind of city that used to make steel and now makes do. My father, Doug Webb, worked 31 years at Stelco before the plant restructuring. My mother, Sandra, was a dental hygienist. They raised me and my younger brother, Patrick, in a semi-detached on Dunsmuir Road that they bought in 1980 for $89,000, and which my father considered the best decision he ever made because it was theirs. I was not a complicated kid. I liked building things. I took apart and reassembled a lawnmower engine at 13. I volunteered as a laborer for a habitat build at 17 and came home knowing what I wanted to do. I got my Red Seal certification in carpentry at 21, took a supervisor's course at 23, and spent the next 16 years working my way up at a mid-sized construction company called Landmark Build. By 2021, I was senior site supervisor, overseeing projects worth $2 to $8 million, managing crews of 25 to 40 people, and making $94,000 a year in base salary plus project bonuses. I met Diane Forsyth at a friend's kitchen party in Dundas in 2010. She was a mortgage broker, 29, organized the way people are organized when they decide early that their life is going to go in a specific direction and they are prepared to do whatever it takes to get it there. She was the plan. I was the person who showed up and built things. We worked. We married in 2013. Our son Theo came in September 2015, 7 pounds 8 ounces, with eyes that looked at you like they already had opinions. Our daughter Isla arrived in April 2018, quieter, watchful, with her mother's hair and the habit of studying a situation for a long time before deciding what she thought of it. We bought a house in Ancaster in 2016, 4 bedrooms, a double garage backing onto a ravine. It was more house than I had grown up in, and I was proud of that in the specific way that men who grew up in semi-detached are proud of houses with double garages. I thought we were building something solid. September 2023, Landmark Build went into receivership, not because of anything I did or failed to do. The company had overextended on 3 large commercial contracts, 2 of which had payment disputes with municipal clients, and the cash flow gap was catastrophic. In 4 weeks, I went from senior site supervisor to employment insurance claimant. EI covered $668 a week. Our mortgage was $3,200 a month. Diane's income covered her car payment and Theo's hockey registration and gymnastics in the groceries. It did not cover the mortgage. The math was straightforward and the direction was only one way. I applied for jobs, every site supervisor position in Hamilton, Burlington, Brantford, Kitchener, senior positions, junior positions, positions I was overqualified for by a decade. Every application went into the digital void where applications go to be processed by algorithms that determine you are either a perfect match or you do not exist. The interviews I got ended with, "Will follow up shortly," delivered in the tone of someone who will not follow up shortly. By March 2024, we were 4 months behind on the mortgage. Diane and I had conversations in the kitchen after the kids were in bed that started as discussions and ended as something harder. "Marcus, what's the actual plan here?" "I'm applying every day. Something will come through." "You've been saying that since October." "Because I believe it. We're 5 months from losing this house." "I know that." "Do you? Because you don't seem." "I know exactly, Diane. I live here too." She stopped asking about the job search in April. She started asking only about money, which is what happens when the person has become inseparable in your mind from the problem. You stop seeing them and you start seeing the balance on the account. By June, she was sleeping in the guest room. By August, she had a lawyer. "I want to separate, Marcus." "Diane, this isn't working. I can't carry the household alone. I'm not able to do that. I've been applying every day for 9 months. This isn't me giving up. This is a market. I understand that it's difficult, but I have to think about the kids. I am thinking about the kids. I'm their father. And right now their father can't provide for them. That's just the reality. The divorce was handled by lawyers who charged money I didn't have, which meant I borrowed against the very little that remained. Diane got the house. She got primary custody of Theo and Isla because she had stable income and stable housing and a coherent plan, and I had a 2017 Ford F-150 with 214,000 kilometers on it and 480s in my account. Visitation every other weekend, subject to review. The day I signed the separation agreement, Diane looked at me across the table in her lawyer's boardroom and said something I have carried with me every day since. Not because it broke me, because of how certain she was when she said it. "You're a burden, Marcus. You've always been a burden to people who were trying to build something. I should have seen that sooner." She said it quietly, the way you say a thing you've been thinking for a long time and have finally decided there's no reason to keep to yourself. She believed it completely, and that was worse than anger, because anger knows it might be wrong. Conviction doesn't. I moved out that evening with 2 duffel bags and a toolbox and drove to a Walmart parking lot on Centennial Parkway because Walmart doesn't tow overnight. I slept in the truck bed under a sleeping bag I'd bought at Canadian Tire for $40. I brushed my teeth in a Walmart bathroom. I ate from Tim Hortons drive-thrus until the money ran out, and then I ate from food banks when they were open and from dumpsters when they weren't. I tried the shelters, Wesley Urban Ministries on King Street East, Good Shepherd on Mary Street. They were full. Hamilton's shelter system operates at over 100% capacity most nights, which means there are more people who need beds than there are beds, and the gap between those two numbers is not an abstraction. It is a man sleeping in a truck in a Walmart parking lot in November when the temperature drops to -11. I got 2 weeks at Good Shepherd in late November, a cot in a room with 34 other men, each one carrying the version of the story that ends the same way. I didn't talk about how I got there. Nobody did. That's a rule nobody writes down, but everyone follows, because saying it out loud makes it real in a way that silence doesn't. I met Frank Delacroix on my second night. He was 58, a former pipe fitter, a gambling problem that had cost him 2 jobs and a marriage and finally a house, cycling between the shelter and wherever else you cycle when the shelter's 14-day limit expires. He had an extra pair of work boots, size 10, 2 sizes too big for me, and he handed them over without being asked because he'd seen me looking at my shoes and understanding what he was looking at. "They're too big," I said. "Too big is better than nothing," he said, "and nothing is where you're headed." We ate together when there was food. We watched each other's things. We didn't talk about how we got there. We talked about hockey because in Hamilton you can always talk about hockey. After 2 weeks, the 14-day limit was up and I went back to the truck. The heater started failing on December 3rd. I drove with the seat heater on maximum and my coat still buttoned, and I watched my breath fog the windshield every morning and scraped ice off the inside of the glass with my credit card, which was maxed and therefore good for nothing else. I started going through dumpsters in mid-January, not by choice, by arithmetic. The food banks had hours, the free meals had lineups. A man's body needs a certain number of calories to function in a Canadian winter, and those calories come from somewhere, and when everywhere else is closed at 5:47 in the morning on a Wednesday in February, the somewhere is a black garbage bag behind a Tim Hortons on Barton Street. That's where Hugh Gallagher found me. Now I need to tell you about Bernard, because this story has 2 timelines, mine and his, separated by 40 years, running in parallel like 2 transit lines that turn out to share the same terminal. After I accepted the condition, and I'll tell you about that in a moment, Hugh drove me to Bridgeway House, a converted warehouse on Barton Street East that I had walked past 100 times without knowing what it was. In a small office behind the kitchen, he gave me a wooden box with a brass latch. Inside were 14 letters in Bernard's handwriting, written over the final months of his life by a man who knew he was dying and wanted to make sure the person who came after him understood why the thing he was leaving was worth more than the money. The first letter began, "Marcus, if you're reading this, Gallagher found you, which means you were findable, which means you're still here. That matters. I stopped being findable in 1984 for about 6 months, and it took me a long time to come back. I want to tell you about that, because it's the only reason any of this exists." Bernard Whitmore came to Toronto in 1982 at age 33 from Hamilton. He'd grown up on the East Mountain, worked construction out of high school, developed a drinking problem that was quiet enough to manage until it wasn't, and then became the only thing that ran his life. He came to Toronto thinking the city was large enough to start over in. He was wrong about that. Toronto is large enough to disappear in, which is a different thing. He spent 2 years on a downward slope and 1 year at the bottom, rooming houses, couches, the Esso parking lot, $17 and a story he told himself about deserving nothing. Walter Arsenault found him at a drop-in center on Parliament Street on a Tuesday night in November 1984. Walter was a retired electrician, 62, who volunteered 3 nights a week. He sat down across from Bernard, who was in the corner booth trying to be invisible, and asked him what he had built that he was proud of. "Nobody had asked me that in 3 years," Bernard wrote. "Not what had gone wrong, what I had done that I was proud of. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. And the fact that I was thinking about it, rather than defending myself or explaining myself, was the first moment in a long time that I had felt like a person rather than a problem." Walter helped Bernard get into a residential program at the Donwood Institute, helped him get a job with an electrical subcontractor in Scarborough, co-signed his lease on a bachelor apartment in East York. Bernard was sober by 1985 and employed and indoors, and he never went back to any of the versions of himself that had preceded that Tuesday night. He worked for 8 years as a tradesman in Toronto, saved money, and in 1993, at age 44, he moved back to Hamilton and bought his first property, a decommissioned laundromat on Sherman Avenue that nobody wanted. He converted it into 4 apartments, rented them at rates geared to income, and used the revenue to buy another property, then another. Over 30 years, Bernard Whitmore built a quiet real estate operation that made him a wealthy man who never put his name on anything. Walter Arsenault died in 2001. He left nothing, no properties, no portfolio, no legacy that anyone could measure, but he left Bernard. And Bernard, reading the obituary in a coffee shop on a Thursday morning, decided that the most honest way to honor what Walter had done was to become Walter for as many people as he could, not by running a drop-in, not by fundraising, but by showing up, by being present, by asking the question. In 2007, Bernard bought a former machine shop on Barton Street East and spent 14 months converting it into Bridgeway House, 38 beds, a kitchen, employment and training resources, mental health and addiction support. He funded it from personal accounts, $340,000 a year, and he told no one. He showed up every Tuesday in work clothes to serve dinner and fix what needed fixing, and the residents called him Whitmore, and nobody asked whether that was his first name or his last. The final letter was dated December 2024, 6 weeks before he died. Marcus, I chose you because of the wedding, not the conversation about trades, although I thought about that conversation many times over the years. I chose you because of how you looked when you talked about your work. You talked about it the way people talk about things they believe in. And I've spent enough time around people who have lost what they believed in to know what that loss looks like from the outside. I know you're in it right now. I know what the bottom feels like because I lived there. And I know that the only way off the bottom is someone sitting down and asking the right question. I can't sit down with you, I'm dying, but I can leave you something better than a conversation. I can leave you a building full of people who need someone to ask them the question. Bridgeway isn't a shelter, it's a promise. The promise Walter made me, passed forward. Run it with your hands, not just your name. Show up. Eat with people, not at them. Ask the question. The 5 years will end and you'll find you don't want them to. I'm certain of that because I know what it feels like to discover that purpose is not something you find. It's something you build. You know how to build things. Now I'm giving you something worth building. Your great-uncle, Bernard. I accepted the condition on February 18, 2025, 9 days after Hugh found me in that alley. I signed the papers in Hugh's office on King Street West in Toronto, wearing a shirt and trousers Hugh had picked up for me from a Hudson's Bay on the way, because there are documents you cannot sign in a donated parka. Mr. Webb, Hugh said, are you certain? 5 years is a significant commitment. Mr. Gallagher, I said, 9 days ago I was eating out of a garbage bag behind a Tim Hortons. A significant commitment sounds like a promotion. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on Barton Street East in March, 12 minutes from Bridgeway. The estate trust covered the rent. It was a second-floor unit with a gas radiator and a window that faced the street and a shower. I stood in that shower for 40 minutes on my first night and cried, not from sadness, but because hot water on clean skin after 3 months of truck stops and parking lot winters is not a comfort. It is a restoration of something you didn't know had been taken from you until it was given back. Bridgeway House was not what I expected. I expected institutional, fluorescent lights and cot rows and the specific gray of a space that has given up on the idea of being anything other than functional. Instead, I walked into a building that was clean and warm and organized, with a mural on the main hallway wall painted by a former resident, a mountain scene with Georgian Bay in the background, and a reading corner with a bookshelf that had actual books people were actually reading, and a kitchen that smelled like vegetable soup because someone was already making lunch at 9:30 in the morning. Carla Beaumont met me at the door. She was 52, had been running day-to-day operations for 6 years, and had the quality that the work demands, which is the ability to be simultaneously immovable and adaptable, to hold a line and know exactly when the line needs to move. You're the new director, she said. Apparently. Experience in shelter management? None. Social work? None. Nonprofit administration? None. She looked at me. I looked at her. In that look was the assessment of a woman who has been reading people in this building for 6 years and knows the difference between someone who showed up because they had to and someone who showed up because they understand what the building is for. What do you have? She said. 16 years in construction, site supervisor, managing crews of 40 on projects worth up to $8 million, supply chain, scheduling, problem-solving, systems. I paused, and 3 months ago I was sleeping in my truck in a Walmart parking lot on Centennial Parkway. I know what it feels like to walk through a door like this one and not know if anyone on the other side gives a damn whether you make it. Carla was quiet for a moment. Whitmore, she said, always said the best qualification for this work was having needed it. We'll see if he was right. She extended her hand. Welcome to Bridgeway House, Mr. Webb. I'll show you how we do things. You show me where we can do them better. The first month was hard in the way that learning something real is hard. The building ran well because Carla had built the systems over 6 years, and what I was learning was not the operations but the people. In a construction project, a scheduling problem is a scheduling problem. At Bridgeway, a scheduling problem might be a resident who cannot get to a morning job training session because they don't have safe childcare, and the subsidized program on the other side of the city has a 6-month wait list. The variables are different. The stakes are different. I spent the first 2 weeks making mistakes and listening in that order. But some things transferred. Logistics is logistics. Supply chain thinking applied to food donations, clothing drives, pharmaceutical supplies for the medical support program. I streamlined the food donation network, partnered with 3 restaurant operations in the East End for daily contributions that reduced the kitchen supply budget by 22%. I established a skills matching program with 4 local employers, a commercial cleaning company, a residential landscaping operation, a food service contractor, and a building maintenance firm that agreed to interview Bridgeway residents for entry-level positions and provide 6-month supported employment. Within 8 weeks, 11 residents had employment. But the work that mattered most was Tuesdays. Every Tuesday I served dinner, vegetable beef soup, bread rolls, a simple dessert, the same meal Bernard had served every Tuesday for 17 years. I stood behind the counter and served 38 plates and learned every name and sat down after service and ate with the residents, because Bernard's letter had been clear about this. You don't serve food to people, he wrote. You eat with them. The serving creates hierarchy. The eating creates community. Walter didn't hand me a bowl of soup across a counter. He sat down and ate soup with me. That's why I'm still here. Brent Kowalski was the first resident I really understood. He was 34, had served 2 tours with the Canadian Forces in Afghanistan as an infantry section commander, and had come back in 2014 with a traumatic brain injury from an IED incident and the kind of PTSD that the military medical system had managed with medication and periodic check-ins for 3 years before discharging him from both. His marriage had ended while he was on his second tour. He'd held 4 jobs since coming home, lost all 4 to a combination of the TBI symptoms and the PTSD. He'd arrived at Bridgeway on a referral from a veteran support organization 6 weeks before I took over. We talked on Tuesday evenings after dinner, not about Afghanistan, not about the injury, not about the marriage or the jobs. I asked him what he had done that he was proud of. Bernard's question, Walter's question, the question that changes the frame. I kept people alive, he said. That was the job. You keep your section alive, you do your job. And now I can't keep myself employed for more than 8 months at a time. You're here, you're eating soup, you came back on a Tuesday. That's something. Barely something. Barely is where it starts. I was eating out of a garbage bag 3 months ago, now I run this building. Barely is where it starts. He didn't say anything, but he came back the next Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that. By May, through a partnership I'd arranged with a Hamilton Veteran Support Organization and St. Joseph's Healthcare, Brent was enrolled in a structured TBI rehabilitation program and had been accepted as a participant in a peer support training course for veterans transitioning to civilian services. He was going to support other veterans, different role, same mission. I went back for Frank in March, called Good Shepherd, found out he was cycling between there and a rooming house on Victoria Avenue, and drove over one morning and found him standing outside with his boots on and a coffee in his hand like he'd been expecting me. "What are you doing here?" he said. "I've got a building," I said. "It has a kitchen and I need someone reliable who knows how to work hard and complain with commitment. I don't need charity. I'm offering a job, kitchen support 15 hours a week plus a bed while we work on the next step." He got in the truck, didn't ask more questions. That's something I've come to understand about people who've been through extended hard times. When someone offers a real thing, they don't interrogate the offer. They just get in the truck. Frank's been at Bridgeway 4 months now. He's in the problem gambling program at St. Joseph's. He's sober, employed, settled into a routine that gives his days a shape. He complains about the soup being too salty every Tuesday, and I tell him to add less salt when he's helping make it. And he says the recipe doesn't call for less salt, and I tell him to adjust the recipe, and he tells me I don't understand soup. We've had this conversation 11 times. I expect we'll have it 40 more. Diane found out about the inheritance in April, not from me. From my brother Patrick, who had been contacted by Hugh as part of the estate notification process and who told our father, and somehow that information reached Diane. She called on a Monday evening. I was at Bridgeway, reviewing the employment partnership contracts. "Marcus, we should talk." "About what?" "About everything, about what happened between us, about the kids. We have a custody arrangement, Diane. It's working. I was wrong about what I said about some things I believed about you." "Which part?" Silence. "I said something to you in that boardroom that I shouldn't have said. You believed it when you said it." "Yes. So it wasn't wrong, it was honest, and now you've heard about the inheritance and you'd like to revisit the honesty." "That's not." "Diane, a man's value isn't what he earns when things are easy. It's what he is when everything falls apart. When everything fell apart, you told me I was a burden, and 60 people in a shelter on Barton Street told me by their presence and their trust that I was worth something. I know which of those things taught me more about who I actually am." She didn't call again after that. The custody arrangement was modified in May. My lawyer presented stable housing, stable income, demonstrated community commitment, a role with genuine social function, and a professional reference from Carla Beaumont. The judge awarded expanded access, with a pathway to equal shared custody over the following 12 months. Diane didn't contest it, maybe because the optics of contesting a man who runs a homeless shelter are not straightforward. Or maybe because she saw something she recognized from before, the version of me who showed up and built things. Theo and Isla came to Bridgeway for the first time on a Friday in May. Theo was 9 and moved through the building in assessment mode, the way he's always processed new environments, quietly gathering data before forming an opinion. Isla was 6 and immediately attached herself to the kitchen, specifically to Frank, who discovered that she found him funnier than anyone else in the building did, and therefore gave her a dedicated audience for his complaints about the soup. "Dad," Theo said, watching me serve dinner to the Tuesday line, "you feed people. Among other things. And you help them get jobs. When we can. And you used to live kind of like them. For a while." He thought about that for a moment. 9 years old, sorting out the relationship between the father who had lived in a truck and the man standing behind the counter with a ladle. "Are you okay now?" he said. "Yeah, for the first time in a while, I'm really okay." "Then I'm glad you have this," he said, and he went back to watching Frank teach Isla the alleged correct way to salt soup, which involved a demonstration of the mistakes other people make. "I sold the Perry Sound cabin in June. Bernard's letter had anticipated this. Do with the assets what the mission requires," he wrote. "The cabin was mine because I loved Georgian Bay. You didn't earn it by loving Georgian Bay. Use it for something that matters." The sale generated $840,000. I used it to fund the renovation of a second property Bernard's estate held in Brantford, a former small commercial building, into a 12-bed extension of the Bridgeway model focused specifically on veterans. Brent Kowalski helped me write the program design. He sat in the Bridgeway office for 4 evenings in a row with a notepad and wrote down everything he'd needed when he came home that nobody had been able to give him. "Build what you needed," I told him. "What if I don't build it right? You were a section commander. You kept people alive under fire. I think you can handle program design for a 12-bed facility in Brantford." He almost smiled, almost. My father, Doug Webb, drove down from Hamilton's East Mountain in June. He walked through Bridgeway the way men of his generation walk through unfamiliar spaces, slowly, with attention touching nothing, saying little. He looked at the mural. He looked at the kitchen. He looked at the residents eating lunch and the staff managing the afternoon schedule, and his son in an apron talking to a woman about her job application. "Bernard built this," he said. "He did." I didn't know him well. He left Hamilton before I was old enough to know much about anyone. We thought he was just some fellow who'd made money in Toronto. He was, and he was this too. Doug looked at me. "My father has never been a man who performs his feelings. He delivers them in small quantities when he's decided the delivery is warranted." "Your mother would have understood this," he said. "She died in 2018. He still speaks about her sometimes in the present tense, which is its own kind of ongoing grief." "I think she would." "Bernard saw something in you. He saw what I was going through. He recognized it because he'd gone through it." Doug nodded slowly, the nod of a man processing something that has rearranged something else. "Smart man," he said. "Must be a Webb thing." It's July now, 5 months into the 5-year commitment, 55 months to go, but I stopped counting somewhere around month 3 because counting means you're waiting for an endpoint, and I've stopped waiting for this to end. Bridgeway's transition rate, residents who move to stable independent housing within 12 months, has increased from 41% to 58% since January. The employment partnership has placed 23 people in jobs. The Brantford facility opens in September. Brent starts as program coordinator in August part-time while continuing his rehabilitation program. Frank is down 12 pounds of the weight he'd put on during the hard years and has started talking about getting his pipe fitter ticket reinstated. He says the soup is getting better. He's probably right, though he'll never say so directly. Tuesday evenings I stand behind the counter at Bridgeway House with a ladle in my hand and serve vegetable beef soup and bread rolls to 38 people. The same meal Bernard served every Tuesday for 17 years. The same meal I will serve every Tuesday for as long as this building stands. Brent is at a corner table tonight helping a new resident fill out a job application for the building maintenance company. He's staying on Tuesday evenings even though his formal program has mostly moved to Wednesdays. He says Tuesdays are when the question gets asked. He doesn't want to miss a Tuesday. Frank is in the kitchen. He's added a little too much salt again. He'll tell me it's my fault for having a substandard recipe. I'll tell him he's free to write a better one. He'll tell me he's a pipe fitter, not a chef. I'll tell him he's also a kitchen worker right now, so... He'll shake his head in the specific way that means he has decided to save his energy for an argument worth winning. Theo and Isla are here tonight. Isla has an apron down to her ankles and is serving bread rolls with the focused intensity of someone who has been given a responsibility and has decided it is the most important responsibility in the building. Theo is sitting with Brent, listening to him explain to the new resident how the job application process works, absorbing information about the world that no school in Ancaster would have taught him. I look out at 38 people eating dinner. Some of them will leave Bridgeway and build new lives. Some will struggle. Some will relapse and lose the job and lose the apartment and end up back at the door, and when they do, the door will open and there will be a bed and a meal and someone who will sit down across the table and ask the question, "What do you want to do next?" That's Walter Arsenault's question. It was his before Bernard made it his, and Bernard's before he gave it to me. My ex-wife told me I was a burden, that I had always been a burden to people who were trying to build something. She was wrong, not because I inherited $12.8 million. Because 38 people in a building on Barton Street show up every day, and I show up for them, and in the showing up I have built something that did not exist before I walked through that door. Bernard Whitmore was sleeping in his car in 1984. Walter Arsenault sat down across from him on a Tuesday night and asked the right question. Bernard built a career, then a shelter, then left both to a man he'd met once at a wedding 30 years before, because he saw something in the loss that looked familiar. Marcus Webb was sleeping in his truck in 2024. Bernard Whitmore found him with a lawyer and a letter and a building full of people who needed someone who understood what they were going through. A $12 million estate and a condition. A set of property deeds and a ladle. A cabin on Georgian Bay and a question. What do you want to do next? I want to serve soup. That's what I want to do next, and the next Tuesday and the Tuesday after that. For 5 years or 50, for as long as there are people who walk through that door believing they've become invisible and leave believing they've been seen. That was Bernard's condition. And it turns out it was never a catch, it was the whole thing.